Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Johnson. This Thanksgiving, my mother looked me dead in the eye and told me I was no longer her daughter, all because of a vicious lie my brother told. So, I disowned them right back. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made. This is the story of how it all went down. Where are you all watching from today? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story about toxic family dynamics and finding your own justice, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss this. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon should have been comforting. It was Thanksgiving, after all. A day painted in the warm, nostalgic colors of autumn, family, and gratitude. But as I sat at my mother's meticulously set dining table, the air felt thick and cold, heavy with unspoken resentments that no amount of pumpkin spice could mask. The silver gleamed under the chandelier. The crystal glasses sparkled, but it all felt like a stage set for a play I never wanted to be in. I was 29, juggling a full-time job while trying to finish my master's degree. And this dinner was supposed to be my one day of rest, a break from the relentless pressure. Instead, it felt like I'd walked into the lion's den wearing a meat-scented perfume. Across the table, my brother, Robert, was holding court. At 35, he still lived at home, a perpetual prince in our mother's kingdom. He had a way of speaking that made even the most mundane story sound like an epic tale of his own brilliance. Today's topic was his latest investment opportunity, a vague and shimmering promise of wealth that everyone at the table, especially Mom, was eating up. And the best part, he said, leaning forward with a conspiratorial grin, is that it's a family affair? We all rise together. I forced a smile and took a sip of my wine. A family affair with Robert usually meant everyone else's money and his profit. I'd learned that lesson the hard way years ago. That sounds ambitious. Robert, I said, choosing my words carefully. His eyes, the same shade of blue as our mother's, flickered toward me. The grin tightened. Oh, you know, Sarah, some of us think about the family's future, not just our own little projects. The dig was subtle, but it landed exactly where he intended. My little project was my education, the one thing I was building for myself, away from the tangled web of our family's expectations. Mom chimed in immediately, her voice dripping with adoration for her son. Now, Robert, be nice. Your sister is just focused. She's always been the independent one. It was meant to sound like a compliment, but we all knew what it really was. A criticism. In our family, independent was a code word for not a team player. It meant I wasn't contributing to the central pot, the one Robert was always dipping into. I tried to steer the conversation back to neutral territory. The turkey is amazing. Mom, you really outdid yourself this year. Thank you, dear, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. It's a lot of work, you know, hosting these things, especially with finances being so tight lately. And there it was, the opening. Robert seized it like a predator. He put down his fork with a theatrical sigh, a look of profound concern washing over his face. It was an expression I knew well. It was the one he always used before he was about to drop a bomb. Speaking of tight finances, he began, his voice low and serious. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Mom, I didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving. But it's serious. Every eye turned to him. The clinking of cutlery stopped. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My stomach twisted into a knot. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it was aimed at me. I was looking over the family trust accounts last week, he said, his gaze sweeping the table before landing squarely on me. The family trust was a modest fund our grandparents had left. Meant to be an emergency cushion or a down payment on a house for either of us. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant. And I noticed a rather large withdrawal, $5,000, to be exact, made about a month ago. Mom's face paled. What? No one told me about that. Robert, you didn't. It wasn't me. Mom, he said, shaking his head sadly. He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a sickening, faint disappointment. Sarah, is there something you want to tell us? About your tuition, perhaps? Or maybe that new laptop you have? The accusation hung in the air, suffocating me. It was so sudden, so outrageously false, that for a second, I couldn't even speak. My mind raced. $5,000? I hadn't touched that account in years. I had paid for my tuition and my laptop with money I had painstakingly saved from my job, working late nights and weekends, sacrificing my social life. The very idea that I would steal from my own family was a punch to the gut. What are you talking about? I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't take any money. Robert, you know I wouldn't. He just shook his head, a master of feigned sorrow. I didn't want to believe it either, sis. But the date of the withdrawal, it's the exact day your tuition was due. Mom's head snapped towards me. The flicker of doubt in her eyes was instantly extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. She didn't ask for my side of the story. She didn't pause to consider the son who had a history of bad investments and a talent for creative accounting. She looked at me, her daughter, and saw a thief. Sarah, her voice was dangerously quiet. Tell me your brother is lying. He is, I said, my voice rising in panic. Mom, I swear. I paid for my school with my own money. I have the pay stubs, the bank statements to prove it. But my proof didn't matter. The accusation was the only thing she heard. Robert had lit the fuse. And my mother, his ever-loyal soldier, was ready to watch me burn. The perfect Thanksgiving dinner was over. My trial was about to begin. The dining room, once a picture of holiday warmth, had morphed into a cold, sterile courtroom. The faces of my relatives, Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, my cousins, were a jury of shifting, uncomfortable glances. They looked from me to my mother, waiting for her verdict. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the verdict had already been decided. Robert was the prosecutor, basking in the grim spotlight he had created, while I was alone in the defendant's box. How could you? Sarah. Mom's voice trembled, but it wasn't with sadness. It was with rage. After everything we've done for you, we've always supported your choices. Again, that word, dripping with condescension. My choice to get an advanced degree, to build a life for myself, was being twisted into a motive for a crime I didn't commit. I didn't do it, I repeated, my voice stronger now, fueled by a surge of adrenaline and disbelief. Mom, look at me. This is Robert's play. He's done this before. Twisted things. Do not speak about your brother that way, she snapped, slamming her hand lightly on the table, making the glasses tremble. He is the one who looks after this family's finances. He is the one who discovered the theft. He is trying to protect us from you. The injustice of it was like a physical blow. I turned to my brother, who was watching the scene unfold with a calm, almost serene expression. Robert, tell her the truth. Tell her you're lying. He let out a short, bitter laugh. The truth? The truth is that my sister, the brilliant academic, thinks she's above us all. She probably thought she was entitled to that money, a little advance on her inheritance. Right. Sarah? Aunt Carol, ever the family gossip, gasped theatrically. Oh, my To think she would steal from the family trust. Your grandparents would be so ashamed. I didn't steal anything. I was practically shouting now. My composure shattering. I have proof. My bank records are on my phone. Let me show you. I can show you the transfer from my savings account to the university. I reached for my purse, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. This was it. The one piece of hard evidence that could cut through the lies. But as I pulled it out, my mother's hand shot across the table and clamped down on my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin. "Put that away," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Do you think we're fools? That you wouldn't have fabricated something? We are not going to sit here and look at your doctored evidence. The fact that you even prepared a defense is proof of your guilt." Her logic was so twisted, so profoundly broken, that I was left speechless. I was guilty because I wanted to prove my innocence. The room fell silent again, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. My own mother was blocking me, physically stopping me from presenting the truth. She didn't want the truth. She wanted a villain, and she had already cast me in the role. The trust wasn't just a fund, it was a symbol. And in her mind, I had desecrated it. Uncle Jim, a man who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. "Now, let's all calm down. There must be a misunderstanding." Robert cut him off. "There's no misunderstanding. Uncle Jim, it's simple math. The money is gone, and Sarah suddenly has enough to pay for her tuition. It's not complicated." He leaned back in his chair, a smug look of victory on his face. He had won. He had successfully painted me as a desperate, ungrateful thief. I looked around the table, from one averted face to another. No one would meet my eyes. Not my aunt, not my uncle, not my cousins who I had grown up with. They were all siding with her, with him. They were choosing the easier path, accepting the lie because it came from the family's golden boy and was validated by the matriarch. My entire life, I had felt like an outsider in my own family, but I had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alone. The feast on the table had grown cold. The turkey looked grotesque, the cranberry sauce like coagulated blood. This wasn't a family dinner, it was an execution, and my mother held the axe. She released my wrist, leaving red marks where her nails had been. She stood up, her posture regal and unforgiving. "I am so disappointed, Sarah. More than you will ever know." Her voice was cold, final. "As of this moment, you are no longer welcome in this house. You have broken my trust, and you have broken this family. I don't have a daughter who is a liar and a thief." The words, "I don't have a daughter," echoed in the silent room. She had disowned me, in front of everyone, over a lie I hadn't even been allowed to disprove. The pain was sharp, but something else was rising underneath it. A cold, hard rage. As my mother's words of disownment settled over the room, a strange calm washed over me. The initial shock and frantic need to defend myself evaporated, replaced by an icy clarity. Her pronouncement wasn't the end of a fight. It was the final, ugly confirmation of a truth I had been avoiding my entire life. I had never truly been her daughter. I was a supporting character in the grand drama of her and Robert. Her love was conditional, transactional, and the terms had always been set by him. As I stood there, stripped of my place in the family, a memory surfaced. So vivid it felt like it was happening all over again. I was 16. I had saved up for months, working a miserable summer job scooping ice cream, to buy my first car. A beat-up but reliable sedan. I was so proud of that car. It was my freedom, my first real piece of independence. 2 weeks after I bought it, Robert, then 22, borrowed it without asking. He was going to a party and wanted to impress a girl. He returned it the next morning with the entire passenger side scraped and dented. He'd sideswiped a pole in a parking lot. When I confronted him, he laughed it off. "Relax, it's just a scratch. I'll get it fixed." But he never did. When I pressed him, he got angry. When I told our parents, my mother's response was immediate and crushing. "For heaven's sake, Sarah, it's just a car. Your brother made a mistake. Are you trying to cause trouble?" She paid for the repairs out of her own account. But the lesson was clear. Robert's mistakes were just mistakes. My feelings about them were the real problem. He had violated my property, my trust, and I was the one who was told to be quiet, to forgive, to absorb the cost of his recklessness. That memory, that old, familiar sting of injustice, became my anchor in the storm of this Thanksgiving. This wasn't a new betrayal. It was just a louder, more public echo of a pattern that had defined my life. Robert takes, Robert breaks, Robert lies, Mom protects, Mom enables, Mom excuses, and I was expected to silently accept the collateral damage. But I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't the girl who would cry in her room over a dented car door. I was a 29-year-old woman who had built a life on her own terms, through her own hard work. The savings account I'd used for tuition was a testament to that. Every dollar in it represented a late night studying, an extra shift I'd picked up, a small luxury I'd denied myself. That money was mine, earned through grit and exhaustion, and I would not let them tarnish it. I looked at my mother, her face set in a mask of righteous disappointment. "You know what, Mom?" I said, my voice eerily steady. "You're right. We are done." The room stirred. This was not the reaction they expected. They expected tears, begging, a desperate plea for forgiveness. They did not expect acceptance. "I have spent my entire life trying to win your approval," I continued, my gaze sweeping over Robert, then my aunt and uncle, before landing back on her. "I followed the rules. I got good grades. I worked hard. I never asked for anything. All I ever wanted was for you to see me, not as a counterpoint to Robert, not as a problem to be managed, but as your daughter." I took a breath, the cold anger giving me strength. "But you can't, because you are so blinded by your favoritism, so terrified of admitting your precious son is anything less than perfect, that you'd rather believe I'm a criminal. You'd rather throw me away than face the truth." Robert scoffed. "Oh, here we go. Poor, victimized Sarah. Give it a rest." "No," I said, turning to him, my voice like steel. "I'm not the victim here. Not anymore. I'm just the first one to stop playing this sick game." I looked down at the red marks on my wrist where my mother had grabbed me, a small, physical reminder of the deeper wounds they'd inflicted for years. That simple dent in my car door 16 years ago had been the first mark. This was just the latest in a long, ugly series. My decision solidified, not in a wave of emotion, but in a quiet, resolute click, like a lock falling into place. They thought they were casting me out, but they were just giving me the push I needed to walk away from a prison I hadn't realized I was in. The power dynamic in the room had shifted. I was no longer the accused, pleading for mercy. I was a woman who was finally seeing the full scope of the dysfunction she was born into. And the sight of it didn't break me. It liberated me. I wasn't losing a family. I was escaping a cult. A tense, brittle silence followed my declaration. My mother stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. My words had clearly hit a nerve, but she was too proud to acknowledge it. Robert, however, looked entirely too pleased with himself. He leaned back in his chair, a smug, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. In his mind, he had already won. He had successfully orchestrated my exile and re-solidified his position as the blameless, favored son. He was so caught up in his victory lap, so high on his own arrogance, that he became careless. He reached into the pocket of his blazer, likely going for his phone to escape the awkward silence, when his fingers fumbled. A single folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered, almost in slow motion, onto the plush dining room carpet. No one seemed to notice it at first. They were all too busy staring at me, waiting for my next move. But I saw it. I saw it land. A crisp white rectangle against the deep burgundy rug. My eyes were drawn to the familiar logo at the top, the insignia of the bank that managed the family trust. Time seemed to slow down. Without a word, I bent down and picked it up. My hands were perfectly steady. As I unfolded it, my heart began to pound, not with anxiety, but with a fierce, vindictive hope. It was a bank statement, a recent one, and there, halfway down the page, was a transaction that made the air leave my lungs. Date, October 23rd. Withdrawal, $5,000, but it was the line item right below it that changed everything. Date, October 24th. Transfer to Exotic Auto Lease Group. Amount, $4,985. I looked up from the paper, my eyes locking with Robert's. The smugness on his face had vanished, instantly replaced by sheer, primal panic. His face went ashen. He knew what I was holding. He knew he'd been caught. He had taken the money, not for some brilliant investment or family need, but to lease a flashy car he couldn't afford. A car he had probably told our mother was a company bonus. "What is that?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. I didn't answer her. I kept my eyes fixed on my brother. "My tuition was due on the 25th. Robert," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You said the withdrawal was on the day my tuition was due. You were off by 2 days. But you were right about one thing. It was a rather large withdrawal." I saw him start to rise from his chair, a desperate move to snatch the paper away, but he was too late. I turned it around and held it up for the entire table to see. "He didn't just lie," I announced to the silent room. "He's a fool. He left the evidence in his pocket." My mother took a hesitant step forward, squinting to read the paper. Aunt Carol leaned over, her eyes wide with greedy curiosity. The slow, dawning horror on my mother's face was a sight I would never forget. Her perfect son, the one she had just defended with such vicious loyalty, was a common thief. And he had tried to frame his own sister to cover his tracks. "Robert?" she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thing. "What is this? Exotic auto lease. What is that?" Robert was stammering, his usual smooth eloquence completely deserting him. It's a misunderstanding. It's a business expense. Mom, I was going to pay it back. I just needed to move some things around." His excuses were pathetic, transparent. The proof was right there in black and white, undeniable and absolute. The lie he had so carefully constructed had just been obliterated by a single, forgotten piece of paper. He hadn't just stolen from the family, he had stolen from me too. He had tried to steal my name, my integrity, my place in the family, all to finance his pathetic, materialistic desires. I looked at him, not with pity, but with a profound and cleansing contempt. His panic, his desperation, it was the most honest I had ever seen him. He wasn't a brilliant investor or a charismatic leader. He was just a greedy, insecure man-child who had finally been exposed. I placed the bank statement on the center of the dining table, right next to the platter of cold, untouched turkey. It lay there like a verdict, the truth, finally served. The room was no longer my courtroom. It was his, and his judge, the one who had always been his most ardent defender, looked like she was about to collapse. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from a tense standoff to the dead, heavy silence that follows a massive explosion. The bank statement on the table was the epicenter of the blast, and the fallout was radiating through my family, shattering illusions and exposing the rotten foundations of their relationships. Robert stood frozen, his face a mask of panicked disbelief. He looked like a cornered animal, his lies stripped away, leaving him naked and pathetic. My mother, however, was the one who truly unraveled. She swayed on her feet, one hand gripping the back of a chair for support. She stared at the paper, then at Robert, then back at the paper. The cold certainty she had directed at me was gone, replaced by a devastating, chaotic confusion. Her entire world, the one in which her son was a hero and her daughter was a disappointment, had just been proven to be a fiction of her own making. "Robert, you told me," she stammered, her voice cracking. "You told me she stole it. It was a loan. Mom, a short-term loan." He sputtered, desperation making his voice shrill. "I was going to put it back before anyone noticed. I swear." But the lie was too big, the evidence too clear. He wasn't just a thief. He was a manipulator of the highest order. He had weaponized our mother's love for him and her bias against me, using them as a shield for his own greed. I watched them, not with any sense of triumph, but with a deep, aching finality. This moment wasn't about being proven right. It was about realizing that even with the truth laid bare, nothing could be fixed. The trust was not just broken, it had never truly existed. I picked up my purse from the floor and slung it over my shoulder. My movements were calm, deliberate. "I believe you have some family matters to discuss," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "And since I'm no longer a part of this family, I'll see myself out." My mother's head snapped up. Her eyes, now swimming with tears, were filled with a new kind of panic. It wasn't the anger of being defied. It was the terror of abandonment. She was about to lose her scapegoat. "Sarah, wait," she pleaded, her voice a weak whisper. Don't go." It was the most pathetic plea I had ever heard. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't begging for forgiveness for her cruelty, for her instant and total betrayal. She was just asking me not to leave, not to force her to deal with the mess she had so willingly helped create. She didn't want me. She wanted the old order restored, the comfortable dynamic where her son was perfect, and my role was to be whatever she needed me to be. "Why should I stay?" I asked, my voice genuinely curious. "You told me I wasn't your daughter. You looked me in the eye and called me a thief. You refused to even look at my proof. You believed him," I said, pointing a finger at Robert, "in a heartbeat, without question, because it's what you've always wanted to believe, that he is good, and I am not." I walked to the front door, each step feeling lighter than the last. I could feel their eyes on my back. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see the wreckage anymore. I had lived in it my whole life. My hand was on the doorknob when my mother let out a sob, a gut-wrenching sound of true despair. It wasn't for me. It was for herself. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had sacrificed one child for the sake of a lie, and in doing so, had lost them both. Robert would now be seen for what he was, and she would have to live with the knowledge that she had enabled him every step of the way. I opened the door, and the cool November air hit my face. It felt clean, fresh, like the first breath after being underwater for too long. I stepped outside, onto the porch. and pulled the door shut behind me, not slamming it, but closing it with a quiet, decisive click. I didn't look back. I walked down the path, past the perfectly manicured lawn and the festive holiday decorations, got into my car, and drove away. The tears finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness or loss. They were tears of relief, tears of freedom. I had just lost a family, but I had finally, truly, found myself. Driving away from that house felt like waking from a long, suffocating dream. The familiar streets of my hometown looked different, sharper, as if a filter had been removed from my eyes. There was no rage left, only a profound and quiet emptiness that was quickly being filled by a sense of peace. For years, I had been fighting for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome, seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving it. The pain of my mother's betrayal was immense, but the clarity it provided was a gift. She didn't just disown me, she set me free. In the days that followed, there were no frantic calls, no apologies, just silence. That silence was its own answer. It confirmed that their drama, their toxicity, was a closed loop I was never meant to be a part of. My choice to walk away wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of survival. It was choosing my sanity, my future, and my self-worth over a hollow definition of family. True family doesn't demand you set yourself on fire to keep them warm. They bring their own light to the darkness. I was done being their kindling. Now, I had to learn how to be my own fire. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, it was entirely mine. Have you ever reached a breaking point with your own family? What gives someone the strength to walk away from everything they've ever known? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter.